Welcome back to another episode of Boilers Extra. I'm Nathan Baird from Indy Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
We're in the Ross-Ade Stadium press box following, usually we give you a score. There's no score to give you today.
Purdue won the game.
Purdue and lost. Purdue's spring showcase here. I don't know if several hundred people in attendance. When I got here, the R lot was filling up. I thought I guess an okay turnout for these sort of things for Purdue. I think they could probably do a little bit more with it, make it a bigger deal, but that's not really. Maybe that's something Barry Odom addresses down the line. I think this spring was a little bit more about practicality and getting a foothold set. And I think there's some positions where they did that. I think there's some positions where they still have some work to do. But today gave people a glimpse. They call it a showcase, which almost like insinuates that things were like on display. Really, they just held a practice. This is what a Purdue football practice has looked like most of the spring.
Yeah, this is what we've seen now 15 times. I guess 14. I missed one, so I don't know how many you missed, but it looked like what we've seen all spring, and that kind of ends with 11 on 11, hard hitting. Running like a game type situation scenario. They also did some red zone work, things of that. One thing we didn't see a whole lot of was on the kickoff returns. It was just kind of very simulated with one return man back. But that's probably because a lot of the guys who were going to be on the return team are also on the kickoff team, vice versa. But I do think that it was good that the weather was probably as nice as it's been all spring. So you were able to do some more things that you haven't been able to do on the previous 14 practices.
And I thought today was even an example of, we should get into specific details, but just kind of the inside baseball of it. Like one of the things that they've done when they're over at the Bevel Complex is they've got four groups going at once a lot of times. And today they even did some of that. Even though they're here in Ross-Ade, and there's only one football field, as you know, in Ross-Ade Stadium, you were still getting that like four groups working at a time. And if you were watching today, if you were here today and you saw that there were times when the number one offensive line and the number one defensive line are going head to head, and the quarterback behind them was, Garrett Odom, who's a true freshman and is not really in the mix to start at quarterback this year. But that's indicative of things that we saw this spring. There was a lot of moving guys around, a lot of looking at guys in different scenarios, and sort of pressure testing different things and analyzing different things. And they were able to get a lot of those reps in. And now it's a very short amount of time. I mean, the analysis has been going on. And the thing that hangs over today is, and Barry Odom's, I don't know, about the third question he got today, pivoted right to this. Transfer portal opens again on Wednesday. You say there's people coming in. He was up front saying we're going to get some, we're going to lose some. Right. This roster's going to change here in the next month.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be, in these conversations he has in the next few days, he's going to be very frank. If he'll probably tell some people, hey, you might want to go look somewhere else. Now, he's also realistic enough to know that some of these guys are just going to leave, and he may not even know it until he sees it on social media or gets wind of it from somewhere else. But he said Purdue will add through the transfer portal as it needs based on what it doesn't have. So that opens, I think, Wednesday and runs until April 25th. So, a 10-day window there where there's going to be a lot of transactions happening that changes what this roster is going to look like in the fall.
And he said there was something. He told us this back before the start of the spring, right? That there were positions where they need to add just from a depth standpoint. There's also no position, I don't think, on this field that if there was a talent upgrade available, they wouldn't take it. Like it's within reason. They're not paying $4 million for Nico Iamaleva or whatever. And maybe nobody will. Maybe he'll find out that this wasn't the best course of action to take for those of you following the Tennessee saga down there. But they need talent everywhere, and they can't really afford to lose front end talent. So I thought actually the most important thing that happened today was not something we saw, but it was something we heard. And it's when you asked Barry Odom for an update on George Burhan. And we saw him a week ago today over in Mollenkopf go down with what looked like a really bad and was a bad right lower leg injury, one he had to have surgery on this past week. I was very much thinking maybe he doesn't play this year, or maybe it's going to very least cost him the start of the season. And Barry Odom today said they expect him back to start the year. And I thought that was potentially massive news for this offense, just because there just aren't that many dynamic guys yet
Right.
showing themselves on this offense, and he had been one of the exceptions.
Yeah, and this is kind of becoming a recurring theme where a couple years ago, Garrett Miller gets hurt at tight end. Max Clare kind of emerges as a guy, and then he gets hurt, and then the next year Max Clare comes out and does what he did last year that ultimately got him to Ohio State. George Burhan kind of seemed like that next guy in line, and Ryan Walter's staff, when they were here, always said that it felt like that tight end room was as talented as any that could match up with other teams in the Big Ten. There were a lot of positions where it couldn't, but that was one where I think that has proven that was probably somewhat accurate, so much so that produced top 2 tight ends last year playing at different Big Ten programs this coming season. So now George Burhan, if he is able to go, and not only did Barry Odom say he's going to be ready to go, he said it's going to be full ready to go for game 1. And that's massive news. Because Purdue did bring in 3 tight ends through the transfer portal out of necessity as much as anything. But George Burhan had emerged as kind of the guy, looked like the guy that was, a big-time playmaker there. And not a lot of guys that you can look at and say, hey, that guy's going to be a big contributor based on what we've seen this spring, because we know that a lot's going to change between now and then.
And I guess I'll go ahead and get in front of this and say it. Like, that's what Barry Odom says today is their projection. If they get towards that Ball State opener and for whatever reason he's not all the way back, I don't know if I'd call that a setback just based on what Barry Odom said today. But I think they're optimistic, obviously, at the very least, that they'll have him for the season opener. Another thing that was really interesting that I heard today, obviously quarterback and the developing quarterback competition was a big focus of everything we did this spring, watching this team. And today, Barry Odom was asked about the quarterbacks. He made sure to mention Bennett Meredith, who I think sometimes has gotten a little bit overlooked just because he was the one who was already here, and then they bring in 3 transfers and you're trying to find out more about them and see them for the first time. We've seen Bennett Meredith and what he's done here in very limited capacities. But something that was a little bit more telling to me was multiple players were asked about the quarterbacks and about the competition. And multiple guys mentioned only 2 names. Did you catch this?
Yeah.
2 names. Malachi Singleton, who I think is probably the opening day quarterback if they had to pick one today, and Evans Chuba. They didn't mention E.J. Colson in that same breath. And I thought that was a little bit interesting just because we, from talking to the people last week at practice, there was this idea that like, well, we have seen Evans Chuba do some really impressive things. We have seen Evans Chuba, I think, occasionally do some impressive things, but also seen him throw a lot of interceptions this spring. And that maybe colored our opinion of where they stood. But there seems to be some optimism on this roster from the actual players. And maybe they just meant to say E.J. Colson too and forgot him, but that they would put him kind of as, it sounds like they're putting him number 2 in line right now.
And you're right. Like when he does some things that, throws sidearm and completes a pass and things like that, it's really impressive. Now, can you get away with that in a Big Ten game? It's yet to be seen. But he definitely has he's got probably the best body for it. He's a tall, athletic guy, and he's got the ability to move with his legs. He rushed for a touchdown today against I think the number 1 defense at one point. So that was promising. But you're going to need consistency and the guy who's not going to lose you a game to a degree too. And for me, I've seen him throw too many balls that were 50-50 balls that end up getting batted up in the air and picked, or just bad plays. But yeah, I think those 2, and I'm glad that Barry Odom mentioned Bennett Meredith. I wrote about him last week because like he's been the most consistent to me, guy that's not going to he doesn't take as many risks, but he makes the winning or right play a lot of times when things break down.
Yeah, he might be the not as much of a high ceiling. I think I see higher ceilings with other guys, but he may also have the highest floor in terms of some of the things you're talking about, just like decision making. And I think just familiarity and comfort being a Purdue quarterback. That's the other thing to remember is I think the defense was ahead of the offense this spring and played ahead of the offense in a lot of cases this spring. But the offense also, A, was missing some important people, and then B, was asking these 4 fairly untested quarterbacks to come in and learn a new system and compete and with those chopped up reps and those cycled through reps. So I think as that group, as that specific position finds more consistency, I think the offense might look better overall. And we're throwing a quick recap at you today. We're gonna come back with a longer Boilers Extra early this week, next week, whatever, however you want to look at it, whenever you're hearing this, seeing this, and kind of go position by position and give a little bit of a lay of the land. We need to do it before Wednesday, because once the transfer portal opens on Wednesday, I don't think it's going to be a mass exodus like you see at the end of a season, but there's definitely going to be some attrition here, and they're definitely going to add some guys. Anything else that stood out to you from today?
I've been impressed with the secondary this spring, especially given what it doesn't have. Everybody who had a start in the secondary from last season, including a guy who was a third-team All-American a couple years ago, is gone, and it's completely new guys. And then Hidari Hines and Stu Smith, guys who weren't playing a whole lot last year, and stepped into bigger roles. I thought that was a place where Purdue improved significantly, not just based on the guys they lost, but just the guys they brought in. I think as a whole can be better than what the unit was. You certainly hope so if you're a Purdue fan.
This is why I wish in some ways that this had been more of a structured, real scrimmage. We did see one last week, but even then, I would just like to be able to see it in more of a real competition, back and forth game kind of scenario. And they've got enough players to think they could have done that, but whatever. That's only for my benefit. It's not necessarily for theirs. So whatever. But I think it says something to me. And this doesn't mean everything, but it doesn't mean nothing. That when you've got players like today, the number one defense, you have guys like CJ Nunnally, who has at the MAC level, but was a great player at the MAC level, like two-time first-team all-conference player in the MAC. Crew Wakely and everything he's done in his career and everything he's accomplished. Tony Grimes at times with the ones today, the corner who came from UNLV in North Carolina before that and has played a ton of football. Those guys were not with the ones at times today. Those guys were second-string guys today. And maybe that's just that they're trying to get other guys certain matchups, again, as this evaluation kind of comes to a critical point at the end of the spring. But I also think that people like Crew Wakely and CJ Nunnally have been there all spring, really, as second-string guys as they've lined up. And if those are the quality of your second-string guys in both experience and accomplishment, I think you can be cautiously optimistic about the baseline that is being set there. Because let's face it, last season, in terms of pass rush and in terms of the secondary competence, like I don't know what the word to say, both those things should work in concert in a good way, and they worked in concert in just a horrific way last year, the absence of them. So that's a thing that had to be fixed, and they had to make progress there, and I think you've seen signs of that this spring.
Yeah, very much so. An experience. One of the things that we heard earlier this week, and then we heard again today, was the guys they brought in have played a lot of football at other programs. It's not like they just brought in guys who were at major programs and were second, third string guys that were just barely getting on the field. These are guys who have started at other programs who are coming in now with 2-3 years of experience, and that bodes well for you. That's huge. As good as Dylan Thieneman was, you were asking a true sophomore last year to kind of be the leader of your defense. So I think now when you have fourth and fifth year seniors who are leading your defense from the back end, that will do well for everybody who's in front, the defensive line and linebackers in front of them.
Yeah, and there's even some guys, we're going to wrap things up here, but yes, there's going to be some guys coming in through the portal. It's also important to remember that they ended the spring, and not just Burden, they ended the spring with some guys who I think they think are going to play here. Malachi Thomas being one of them, the running back. I think he could be a really important guy. Taj Rael, it was playing by the end of the spring, missed the first part of the spring.
The safety from
Memphis, who was back there with Wakely as the one of the second string safeties today. But they Barry Odom mentioned him specifically as somebody that they're intrigued by. Chauncey Magwood didn't end the spring healthy, but a guy who should be in that receiver mix, is experienced and at the power conference level. Like, there's guys who are on this roster still who we didn't get to really see this spring. So that did curb the evaluation a little bit of everything that they have. And in the spring, you're also now at the mercy of you could get a lot of guys in the winter portal because you had to fill out a roster. Now you're a little bit more judicious with it. I think you've seen exactly what you need,
Right.
exactly what you don't have, and when guys go in, you can try to backfill. This is going to be a smaller group that they bring in, but it could end up being a critical group because right now you've sort of set we saw the ones and twos pretty consistently through these last several weeks of spring, and now you can just try to plug and pop certain positions up a little bit and get yourself some momentum towards opening day.
One of the things Barry Odom said was the moves that Purdue makes in this 10-day window here are going to be geared towards trying to win games next season. It's not, professional sports. You don't tank and get the number one pick for sucking. You go out and you try to win every single game, and if you're not successful, that hurts you down the road trying to get some top end players. So yep. I think Purdue probably now has a better idea. First of all, I think the team looks a lot better just in the 15 practices. And then structurally, the way things are run,
the vibe,
it looks a lot more fluid with the way things are going here. And now you get that in place, and now you can just kind of plug the holes where needed.
The way that Devin Mockabee was talking today about a standard was set when Barry Odom got here, and a kind of a vibe was established of how hard they were going to go, and that they just kept that going all the way through the spring. And that's a considerable period of time now. You're talking about pretty much 4 full months of kind of establishing a mindset here. And I don't know how many wins that's going to turn into against what is still a pretty tough schedule this fall. I don't know how many of these guys are among the best 10 or 12 players in the Big Ten at their position, which I think is kind of a crucial measurement of how many Big Ten games you can win. But I do think that some of those, based on what I've seen this spring, it would not surprise me if the games that last year were slipping away, Northwestern, Illinois, Michigan State, maybe you throw into there, maybe they find a way to win those. And maybe that means that a team that should win 4 games does win 4 games instead of 1. And that may sound like we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Long way to go to there. But I just think that that would be a sign of progress. I think this is a season that last year was supposed to be a season of does it make progress or not. You're still trying to bridge to something. It didn't. That was not progress. We've got a new coaching staff, a largely new team here. And now what progress can you make? Because as much as he does and needs to win this fall to keep kind of building the momentum, I still think this is about the long-term project. We're taking Purdue football back to someplace long-term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why Purdue went with an experienced head coach versus last time getting an up-and-coming hot name defensive coordinator who hadn't been a head coach before. I think that's, not a knock on Ryan Walters because he was trying to learn a lot of things on the fly, but Barry Odom learned a lot of things on the fly at Missouri 10 years ago or whenever it was. And so now he's, taken all that knowledge throughout the years. And now you have, an offensive coordinator, a former offensive coordinator whose only job is coaching the quarterbacks. You have a tight ends coach who is your offensive coordinator who's done it at USC. You're putting guys in positions that they've been in before and have gone through the fire and kind of learned, through mistakes. And now, would assume that coaching staff is veteran in whatever roles they have.
We'll cut it off there. We will be back, like I said, early this week, kind of do more position by position, where we think things stand, what we liked, what we think they need to improve on. And we'll probably have some basketball roster news in the week ahead or a couple weeks ahead. We're obviously monitoring that. So for Sam King, I'm Nathan Baird. Thanks for joining us.